Hey, if I haven't gotten a chance to meet you, my name is Scott Johnson. I'm the lead pastor here, and we are delighted that you are here this morning. You know, it's interesting. For many of us, right, there's always been a point in our life where we have made maybe this statement right here. I'm so glad that he showed up in my life when he did. I don't know about you, but I bet there's been times where we look back at our life, we begin to think back upon the times we've had, and we find ourselves saying, I'm so glad he showed up in my life when he did. Or maybe you've made this statement, I'm not sure I would have made it through this without her. I don't know that I would have been able to make it through what's going on. When times are difficult, you know what I've found is there's been times where there have been people in my life that have reminded me that God is enough, more than enough, always enough. Because even as a pastor, can I be honest, this is hard to really swallow. It's hard to really grasp the difficult things of life, but I'm grateful that there have been people that have come through at just the right time. I don't know that I would have made it without her. Or maybe this is what you've said before. I wouldn't be where I am today apart from them. I don't know, maybe that's where you are today. I mean, honestly, that's how I feel today. I mean, if we think about the last 5 years as a church, we would not be here today if it weren't for some of the most remarkable individuals that began this crazy journey with us. You know, I think about Amy Barton, Amy's one of those behind the scenes, hates to be notarized, and she has no clue I'm mentioning her name right now, but this morning she was making sure the coffee was put out and ready to roll. But you know, over 5 years ago, I interacted with Amy with this idea of what if we created a different kind of church, and she bought into that idea and held our family up in moments where we did not know what we were doing, but she trusted us in the process. You know, one of our Wombaland leaders, Tammy Eckert, y'all probably, if you have a Wombaland kiddo, your kids have probably said, Miss Tammy, Miss Tammy, Miss Tammy. My kids have. You know, Jim and Tammy were two of the first people. They were in a circle of people at a house in Lake Worth when we began to cast vision for what we could do and what North Tarrant could look like. We want to create a church where unchurched people, de-churched people who have unchecked the box of faith, that they could find a place where they could be connected and loved, and they could find a place to belong. And Jim and Tammy were right there saying, let's do that. I mean, it's crazy for them to look at some 30-year-old punk and say, we're with you. We're in it. Let's do this. I mean, I think about my parents, my mom and my dad, who they've helped start 3 different churches right now, and most of them have been in the Houston area, and all of a sudden it became, like I told them, not with the anticipation of them uprooting their lives to follow us, but I said, hey, this is a dream that we have. I don't know what it's going to look like. And within a matter of days, they called and said, we're selling our house and we're moving to Fort Worth. We want to be a part of this. And when you think about people that have absolutely held you up, they've encouraged you, they've challenged you, they've walked with you. I mean, I think about Doyle and Cheryl. Doyle's one of the guys, you probably know him as the guy behind the camera. He's the one who takes all the pictures. He's never in any pictures, but he takes all of the pictures. Doyle and Cheryl are a remarkable couple. Doyle and I began working 10 years ago, 12 years ago together at another church, and we would constantly be dreaming about what would it look like if we created a church where regardless of who you were, you could come in and find a place where you belong, and you find your people that help you in your journey of faith. And we began dreaming about this. And then one day I called him. I said, hey, Doyle, I could guarantee you 1 year. Will you take a gamble with me? And he, within a matter of moments, said, sounds good. Here's my resignation. I'm following you. How crazy. But yet, how beautiful it is when we find people that are going in the same direction to hold us up. I remember just after we had decided to begin the process of planting North Tarrant, my wife and I were sitting on the couch and we're just talking about what could be. And one of the things that could be was we found out we're pregnant for the second time. And we're we're about to just completely walk away from my job and start this dream of mine, and we've got a little baby on the way and an 8-month-old. What do you do in those moments, right? And I remember she looked at me and she said, it's either going to be a red flag or it's going to be an excuse, and I don't want our son to be an excuse for the rest of our lives. So we said, let's do this. There have been individuals along the way that have constantly spoke life into me, and I would imagine that you've had individuals that have spoke life into you. They've stepped into your life and they've provided you with insight. They've provided you with encouragement. Maybe they gave you some perspective or they gave you some hope. And you would probably look back and you would think about those people and you'd say, my life would have been completely different if they would not have dropped into my life. I am so grateful for them, which I would encourage you. I would ask you, have you thanked them? Do they know that they are a part of your story? I would encourage you to let them know that they have been a valuable part of your story. Well, anyway, I digress. Today, we're in part 5 of a series we've been titled Faithful, which it comes from this idea that we want to figure out how we can fuel our faith, how we can be full of faith in really a world that finds itself on empty. And today we're looking at the 4th thing. If you've been tracking with us, I'd encourage you go and check out our YouTube channel. As we've got all of our previous messages in the series online where you can catch up. But today we're looking at the 4th thing that I believe will blow up or grow up your faith in the process of your life. And you would probably agree to this. It's providential relationships. It's that idea that somebody stepped into your journey and they began to help you. You probably have a component of your faith journey that says, then I met this guy, then I met this girl, then my mom got remarried to this crazy Christian who dragged us to church. And well, I guess you could say the rest is history, right? I began to see my neighbor who constantly was praying, and he was going places on Sunday morning as I'm mowing the grass. I'm like, what is wrong with you? But there was something special about him that I began to ask him questions of why he does what he does. And he shared with me what's going on. And all of a sudden, we began to realize what it looks like to follow Jesus. And we began to walk it. There's been people in our lives that have encouraged, have challenged, that have led our journey of faith. And when you consider those people, it's almost as if, it's almost like God dropped them into your life at just the right time. And that's why we use the word providential. It's this idea that they showed up at just the right time. It's almost as if it's a divine intervention. Now, for some of you, that individual might have been because of an intervention, right? They might have been knocking on your door at 10 o'clock at night saying, hey, hold up a second. You've got a lifestyle habit that's got to change or your life is going to blow up, right? And you're sitting there thinking, I wish they wouldn't have done that in the moment. But now you look back and you begin to think, I'm glad that friend stuck his nose in my business. I don't know where my marriage would be. I don't know where my life would be. That was providential. God brought them into my life at just the right time. Maybe for you that's part of your story, but maybe you've been that friend. Maybe you've been that boss, that citizen. You've been that person that's there in the midst of it. And you didn't even know that was part of their story, but you just did what you knew to do. And what you found out was you were part of a defining moment, right? You stepped in at the right time and you became a defining moment for that individual, for that person. And isn't it true that the majority of defining moments, they're relational in nature? Like when we think about the defining moments in our life, it always happens to be that person that stepped in and told us what to or what not to do. It was that person that intervened. It was that person that challenged us. And sometimes that defining moment is a good thing, right? You're like, oh man, I'm so glad they came into my life. And sometimes it's a bad thing. Man, they came into my life and they brought that habit that now I can't kick. And oh my goodness, like it was a defining moment in the opposite direction. Sometimes we think we're better off if they're in our life, but sometimes those defining moments were better off if they weren't there. And we've met those folks. We've been those folks. We've realized that. And to be honest, when we think about providential relationships, that is how Christianity began. It began with this idea that God wanted so desperately to have a relationship with humanity that he sent his one and only Son to become one of us, to interact with us, and ultimately to change us. John would put it this way: the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I mean, you think about that. One of Jesus' best friends would think back upon the life of Jesus and say, it was as if God became flesh and dwelt among us. We got to see our Heavenly Father because we got to see how Jesus responded in and through life. And for anybody who's interacted or who Jesus has intersected with their life, they've opted to follow Jesus. That was a defining moment for you. It was a defining moment for me. And the beautiful thing is, there's been people in my life that have helped that. There have been people in my life that have steered me. There have been people in my life that have come in at just the right time. I remember Janet Ross, who when I was a senior in high school, she came up to me, as a senior in high school, you just think life is going crazy and everything, the world revolves around you. And she came up to me and out of the blue, she just said, "Scott, I just want you to know I'm praying for you. And I don't know what life has in store for you in the future, but I could see you being a pastor." I mean, why would she say that? I mean, I was thinking it, but why did you put that in word form? Remember an individual who gave me Proverbs 2, 1-5, Mitch King. He walked up to me and just gave me a little slip of paper. Proverbs 2, 1-5, which says, "My son, if you accept my words and store my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding, then you'll understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God." I began thinking, wow, wait a second. Proverbs 2, it became a critical piece of my story, and he helped in that journey. And for many of you, you've had people that stepped in at just the right time to lead you as you began to follow Jesus. And in fact, that was the story of the early disciples as well. There's a guy named Philip. Jesus walks up to him and says, "Hey, Philip, I want you to follow me. I want you to come and be one of my disciples." And Philip says, "Sounds good. Wait, I got a buddy that I think should join us." And he runs and tells Nathanael, "Guess what? You know the Messiah, the one we've been looking for? I found him." To which Nathanael's like, "No, you didn't. You mean you found the Messiah that the entire Jewish nation's been looking for the last hundreds and hundreds of years? You found him?" "I did, and he's from Nazareth?" I mean, he begins laughing, mocking him. In fact, listen to what it says. John documents this. Nathanael's looking at Philip saying, "Nazareth? Can anything good come from Nazareth?" But Philip didn't give up on his friend. Philip continued on and on. In fact, Philip would look at him and say, "Hey, listen, I just want you to come and see. Come and see. Come and just experience." You don't think Nazareth is kind of crazy. It's the other side of the tracks. But just come and see. And I can only imagine Nathanael was grateful that Philip continued to prod and encourage. Nathanael got a bird's eye view of everything that Jesus did. And I can only imagine that with everything he saw, he couldn't help but think about the fact that Philip encouraged him. Philip said, "Nathanael, come on." That, to me, is a providential relationship. Unfortunately, I wish we could create providential relationships, but we really can't. Right? That would take out the word providential. If we could just create providential relationship, it would take out the word providential. It would become divine. It would take out that divine reality, because there's an element of them just kind of coming in at just the right time. But here's what I've found, and here's one of the things that we've wanted to encourage along the way, is I really believe that we collectively should be proactive. We should be forward thinking and trying to get ourselves around to create relationships with people whose faith informs the decisions and the responses in their life. When you see somebody who's going through a difficult time and they're walking through difficulty, you want to lean in when you see their faith shining like never before. You want people whose faith dictates their life. You want them to speak into your life, don't you? You've had those people, you're like, I don't know how they're doing that. Like, that's crazy that they continue to have that kind of faith. In fact, the author of Hebrews, we're not really sure who wrote. Hebrews is a letter in the New Testament, sort of the back of the New Testament. We're not really sure who wrote it, but he understood this component of relationships and the value that's there. And he addressed this idea, this potential that relationships are necessary. In fact, listen to what he says. He says, "Let us hold unswervingly If you've ever approached a traffic circle, you've seen people that are swervingly, right? It's like, whoa, wait a second, what's going on? Let us hold unswervingly, steady. Let us remain true to the course. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. For he who promised is faithful. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we profess, because he who promised is faithful. I'm choosing to believe that he's faithful. I'm trying to hold on unswervingly. What does that mean? How do we facilitate this unswervingly reality? He continues, and let us consider how we may spur one another on. Let us think about it. Let us give thought to this idea. What can we do to spur one another on towards love and good deeds? It's not just enough to spur people on to believe the right thing. The author of Hebrews is saying, let's spur one another on towards action, towards how we can express this reality. Let us spur one another on towards love and good deeds. And how do we do that? Well, by not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. Why is this true? Because when we get in the habit of meeting together, being around people that are informing their decision of faith, that are walking together, you know what we find? When our faith, when our faithfulness, when us recognizing God's faithfulness really comes in contact with other people, we find out that proximity matters. Being around people that are walking in the same direction, it is a faith builder for all of us. It encourages us. It strengthens us. It allows us to see the direction. But one of the things I've seen, and here's just an observation over the last several months, right, is people drift from their community of faith long before they drift away from faith. And I understand there's an intellectual component to that many times we read a book and all of a sudden we begin to deconstruct the idea of, do we believe in God and what does this really look like? But in many instances, that deconstruction, if you would, it happened not because of a book you read, but it happened because we began to drift away from the community of faith that was encouraging us along the way. In fact, people lose faith when they lose contact with people of faith. That people lose faith not necessarily all because of a book they read, but because they've disconnected, and we've seen that unfortunately come true so many times over the last 18 months. Because it points to this idea that relationships are critical to growing an enduring, growing faith. And here's why. Because when we see God's faithfulness in someone else's life, it's easier to trust him with ours. When we see God's faithfulness in someone else's life, isn't it easier for us to trust him with our life? When we see what God's doing in somebody else's life, it becomes easier. When we begin to see and experience those out of the blue, those crazy moments, and we're like, wait a second, this is a providential relationship. How did they step in? It begins to show up and blow up our faith. We begin to see God's faithfulness in somebody else's life. In fact, one of the things I found is that we all have a role to play in this reality. And staying connected to a community of faith, it grows our faith. It doesn't just grow our faith, but it positions us to play a role in somebody else's journey. As we stay connected to other people that are moving in that direction, it allows us to play a pivotal role in the journey of other people as well. In fact, that's why we began North Tarrant Church 5+ years ago. That's why we're here today to celebrate, is because we wanted to figure out how can we put providential relationships around each and every person. I genuinely believe that from the earliest age all the way up to the oldest age, we all need a community of people around us. And that's why in Wambaland, in Upstreet, our children's ministries, in Transit, with Inside Out, our high school kids, with our community groups, we want to put individuals in a group together so that they can grow together in their faith and they can process faith together. We want everybody doing life because we believe that ultimately your faith grows as you experience what God is doing in other people's lives as well. That you experience what's happening in your life and you experience through others and you begin to share. For us, that's one of the reasons we love to have adults and high school students in our student ministry and in our kids areas, because there's value when you begin to pour your life into somebody else. We love to have the same age group leader with the same kids for 3 to 4 years and more, like as long as we can, because parents, here's what we want. We want to put a like-minded voice in your kid's life to help them make decisions, to help them make the wise choice, to help them make good friends. If I could be as honest as possible, I would encourage you anytime you can to have your kids in the small group areas, because it's a great chance for your kids to experience community, to have a group of faith to help them grow up and blow up their faith as well. You know, that's one of the reasons you've probably heard me from time to time say one of the best things you can do is invite others to come and sit with me, Hey, you know what? Things are not going well. I would love for you just to come and sit with me. Come and hang out with me. Let's come and have a conversation. Come and sit with me at church. And here's why this is a big deal. Is because a single invitation could position you as a catalyst in someone else's faith story. If you begin to think about somebody else and they're going through a difficult time, they're going through a struggle or a frustration, and you begin to open up and you invite someone to join you, maybe to join you here or to join you at your table to have a conversation about what's going on in their life, that single invitation could be absolutely it could change the trajectory of their life. And so I would encourage you, when you find somebody that things are not going well, that they're not from around here, they weren't prepared for, it's a great opportunity for you to say, come and sit with me. Because you never know what hangs in the balance of your courage to ask somebody to join you, to come and sit with me. And here's the crazy thing, is when we begin to really showcase this out, I believe it could change not just this church, but it could change our community. Because everybody wants a place to belong. Everybody wants a place where they can fit in. Everybody wants a place where people are going to lean in and listen. They're going to inspire them, encourage them. And so I want to encourage you today to begin thinking about who are your few that are speaking into you? Who are your few that are speaking into your kids? Who are your few that are encouraging you? Who do you have? Who's tracking with you that is leading you and speaking life into you through their faith journey as well? For some of you today, I would ask if you're looking for that, a great opportunity to be jumping into one of our community groups. We're going to be launching groups tomorrow night beginning at 6:30 over at Cross Church. If you have any questions about what that looks like, I would love to answer those questions because we need people that are tracking with us. And, you know, we tell our kids all the time that the quality of your friends gives you the direction of your life, right? That if you make good quality friends, that it's going to help determine the direction and quality of your life. And it's true not just for 14-year-olds, it's true for 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds as well. You see, when we see God's faithfulness, in someone else's life, it's easier to trust him with ours. So I want to ask you a question. Who are you doing life with? Who are you allowing to speak into you? Whose life right now are you walking with? Whose life do you see being transformed by their faith, and how are they impacting you? You know, we live in a difficult time. We live in a time that is, in many instances, filled with empty tanks, frustrations. But when we find people that legitimately would say, God, you're enough, more than enough, you're all that I need, we can lean into that and allow them to encourage us. And here's the crazy thing. Your story could very possibly be an encouragement for them. Because when we collectively see God's faithfulness in one person, it strengthens our ability to follow him in the process. Would you pray with me? God, we love you, and we thank you so much for the fact that you are a big God. And God, we confess that there's many times that, God, we want to run solo. We want to do life on our own. But God, in the midst of everything, we ask that you would walk with us, that you would showcase these providential relationships, that you would show us those in the meantime, in the nick of time. They came at just the right time. And God, we would lean in and allow them to speak into our lives. God, we love you. God, we need you. And God, more than ever, we need people to help us navigate the crazy waters of life today. We need people to remind us that you are more than enough, that you are enough. Because God, apart from people, I find that my faith is feeble and fragile and frail. So God, help me to be open-handed and to see what's on the other side of the relationships you've placed around me. God, we love you and we thank you. It is in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.